do this because, I don't know, I think just because I really love werewolves. How many people here really love werewolves? It's like, my name is Aaron Von Lupton. I'm from Rumort Magazine. My last name is a little bit like the Latin word for wolf. Lupton is a little bit sort of close to that. Lupine. I love wolves a lot. My dad loved wolves. I have a big werewolf tattoo on my arm. And, but the thing is that with werewolf movies, I think that something kind of happened in the 80s where there was two movies that really kind of nailed it for werewolves. And ever since then, I think we still consider those the best werewolf movies. Howling, obviously, but also American Werewolf in London. And since you all not here, I have no problem admitting that American Werewolf is my favorite.
Let's get that right out of the way, shall we?
So David, why don't you just, I guess, you know, to sort of start things off, how did you get the role? How were you approached to take on the lead in this movie?
Well, you know, we're going back. I actually had to tell one of the fans to stop by my table. You know, 1981 was when this movie was released. And really from the time I got the job to the time it was released was really a very short time in movie times. I met John Landis, who wrote and directed it. I should tell you that John, if you hadn't heard this before, John wrote this screenplay really when he was about 20 years old, 21. And he was working on a film as a production assistant in Europe, and he got the idea. It was Kelly's Heroes was the name of the film he was working on. And as a production assistant, PA, like a kid in his first role, where you do everything as a production assistant. But that's where he was sort of exposed to the notion of werewolves happening in Hungary and Eastern Europe where they were shooting. So he wrote the screenplay, which he did not get a chance to do, of course, until after the success of Animal House and Blues Brothers. So when I met him, it was on the lot at Universal. It was an opportunity. He was seeing lots of different guys for, really he needed the two boys, as he calls them. He needed those two guys right away because he was waiting to tell Rick Baker that he could have us to go into the preliminary makeup. Rick needed the guys as quickly as he could. So even before John, as he tells the story now, even had financing completely locked up, he was still meeting with guys looking for the two roles of Jack and David. So I had a chance to meet him, and it was as green, light a project as it could be, even though I wasn't aware that there wasn't really financing in place. Got a chance to meet him, sat down, talked. He was extremely, if you've ever seen John in person, he's a really highly animated, very funny guy. He's a very relaxed interview. And he gave me a script, he said, read this script. I told him that I'd studied acting in London, I'd been all around Great Britain. He'd asked me if I'd ever been on the moors. I said, no, why? And so I got a chance to read the script, and it was, pretty amazing. And what you saw is really what we shot. It's how it reads. And he called me the next day and said, well, you want to be a werewolf? I mean, that's how easy it was as far as the process. I've been through so many more difficult kinds of processes to get the job. This was one, sat down, we had a long chat, and the next day I was off to Rick Baker's shop in San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles. And then I started to realize what I was in for.
And that's a good lead-in because, of course, what we all remember American Werewolf in London for is the amazing special effects by Rick Baker. They were really groundbreaking at the time. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about what that process was like? Was it horrible? Was it painful?
Yeah, it was all of that. Well, Rick was this guy that John said you got to go meet Rick. Who's Rick? I figured he was the guy. I was meeting John Landis, who was the writer director. Who else was there to meet? He says, you got to meet Rick. He's doing the effects. And he says, so he's really going to put you through, some paces. So, a couple of days later, after initially meeting John, I went over to this shop. I mean, this was not, if you could see Rick Baker's shop now, it's like, it's a factory of special effects. I think he's won 6 Academy Awards. This was the first. And so nobody really knew who he was. He and John had worked together on small little projects. So I literally went over to like rented space and went into this just like a warehouse, you know, small, rented space, with all these guys that were, you know, gooped up. And went, "Are you David?" I said, "Yeah." And Rick came out and said, "What are you playing?" I said, "I'm playing the role of David." He goes, "Well, I feel sorry for you." And that was, you know, immediately was like, "What do you mean you feel sorry for me? What are you talking about?" Well, I found out. But we began to do the process of making molds. The first were my arms, having my arms done. I don't know if you've, you know, I'm sure people know about these processes now. At the time, it was completely like, you want me to do what? Stick my head in this? These were vats of, you know, quick drawing cement. Initially, I had to do my arms, and then I had to do legs. And then, you know, it became time to do heads and different expressions, which they were trying to make molds of. And it was really a claustrophobic, quick drawing cement as it's going on your head and eyes, and you can only just breathe, you know, through your nose. And I said, "Have you guys done this before?" And he went, "Yeah, once." Oh, okay, let's try it. And so I just sort of jumped in and went for it.
Yeah, it always reminds me of, have you ever seen the 80s comedy movie Summer School?
Yes.
And there's that whole, I can still recite the whole, like, the person who we admire most in the world is Little Bars and Preacher Baker. Wow, Warren Figures from Snowballs and Skeletons from London. And I actually saw that before I was from London. But what was it like when you first saw it on screen, you know, when you went through that whole kind of horrible process and then to sort of see your work transform on screen?
Well, I should tell you that, you know, that process with Rick was over a course of a while, you know, and he said, "Well, the next time I see you, we'll be in England, when we'll actually have a lot of this makeup." Is it cold enough in here, by the way? Hello.
I want to go back to Canada where it's warm.
I know where it's warm. So, Rick, you know, the other thing is, it's hard to believe that this is really how it was. There were very few work permits allowed by British Equity when we got over there. Griffin Dunn and I and John, you know, the other really only Americans, and Rick Baker was the fourth American. But his staff, his crew, these guys that he was actually teaching to do makeup, who went on to have long, you know, careers over the last 30 years in makeup effects, didn't have, you know, work permits and such. So they came in as tourists with the makeup effects in their luggage, going through customs. If you can imagine, you know, what do you got in the bag? I mean, just arms and legs and heads. This is really what happened. It was like, no, not a special movie, special, you know, area that you're going to come through with special permits. No, they just kind of brought it in. And so when we got to England, and again, what Rick had requested most from John was that he had time and, of course, the money to develop these things which had not yet been done, or were just in the process of being, you know, put into films. And so we did the entire film and then wrapped, and then we got into transformation, which was the bulk of the makeup that I had to wear. Of course, Griffin Dunn wore different stages of decaying makeup throughout the course of the film, and those parts were ready as, you know, Rick. That was, you know, he was looking at the schedule. When do I have to have this ready by? What is this going to look like? And Griffin was pretty freaked out by it, I have to say. And Rick could tell us the story too. That, you know, Griffin was going, you know, this was a big film role for him, as it was for me. And what do you mean I got to keep decaying throughout the whole thing? You know, that's in the script. You know, you got to read the script. So,
what was your you mentioned John Landis handing you the script. What was your kind of impression of the script? Because it is a very unique film in the sense that it's a pure horror movie, but it's also very much a comedy film.
Well, it starts out that way, certainly. And I should say that, you know, when the film was done and finished, you know, one of the challenges for marketing was letting people know that this was, in fact, a very horrific film. This was not going to be considered a comedy, even though John Landis was very well known for Blues Brothers and Animal House, which was, in fact, a comedy of sorts. So they did the marketing campaign. On the first poster, it would say, from the director of Animal House, a different kind of animal. And that was supposedly the warning, because people thought they were coming in to see. And as you can remember, the first 10 minutes or so are pretty funny. We get to the thing, we're, you know, back of the truck, there's a sheep, you know, we're off on a hike, you know, across the moors. doesn't just look like fun.
Talking about girls.
Yeah, talking about girls and reminiscing and planning our what fun this is going to be. Of course, it does get a little different after we get to the slaughtered land. But so that was really one of the challenges, was trying to make people. And initially, many of the reviews were trying to categorize this. This was one of the first of its kind, again, of a film that was very funny to begin with. And throughout the course, Jack always has that gallows humor. Comes back, hey David, you got to kick yourself. And so people really didn't know how to handle it.
I'd like to open it up to questions from the audience. If anyone has any.
There's one else.
I have a question about when you're in the zoo. Were you really with wolves, or is that just going to be natural again?
No, one of the things I should just say overall about this film is that everything that you see in the film actually we did. Particularly, yes, those are real wolves. I was, told, yeah, they've been fed. Oh, really? And that was the thing where, these are wolves, we're told by their trainers, their trainers, we were told that, you can't really read them like you can a dog that's, that doesn't want to be around you, your ears go back. Wolves just have this blank look, and they just said, try not to make any sudden movement and not a lot of noise. And then the direction was, get out of the cage as fast as you can. Okay. So that was, again, one of these, that was a set, although we did shoot at the zoo. And, they give you those hours of, from dawn until 9 a.m. And then, we open the zoo, you guys have to go. Well, we're shooting that scene with the balloons, and it's after 9 because you're never exactly on the schedule. And, I'm looking over, going, what are those people over there? They go, well, that's the public. It's open. Oh, great. How you guys doing? This is what's going on in this movie.
So what you're trying to tell us is that you really were naked during this.
It really was. There were real balloons. God. Yeah, and those were real wolves. There were 3 of them. 2 females and a male. I was told, well, that's not really going to matter. I just liked it. And it was a one-take kind of situation. They had a set that was built there on the ground, and we set it up, and it was getting dark, so we kept trying to make it look like dawn, even though it's late in the afternoon, and it's getting dark. But it was really going to be a one-shot, one-take deal, hopefully, if I got out of there. And the set started to break as I'm going up the wall. You have to look at it. I got to that point going, don't give way. This fence starts to come away from the wall. The car's going to crash and land back on the little doggies. And so we did one take, and that was it.
Another question, yes, sir.
How did you develop the character? I mean, you got a lot of direction about the character and about the journey of the character for the movie from 90s, or you pretty much do what you love in the script?
That again, I thought it was a pretty well-written script, and you look through the line of it from my standpoint, I always looked at it as the story of a guy who had a tragic flaw. In a traditional sense, what the tragic flaw was, in this particular movie, he was going to turn into a werewolf. But it was something that he could not survive, recover from, and it was going to be his undoing. And so that's a great line to play, the disbelief that you really think something's wrong with you, even though everyone around you is telling you. And particularly one of the best written scenes for me, I thought, was in the movie theater toward the end when I'm meeting with all these victims. And they're very, as the style, and that's John directing. There's no morbidity about this. It's all very upbeat, but we're talking about a very serious subject. Well, electric shock. No, that's too bloody, and so on. That's the style that he created, but it's written on the page, so when you're reading this, you can actually go, I can't believe this. This is just exactly. So that's very helpful. The other thing I want to just mention, as far as everything you saw actually happen, there was a big accident in Piccadilly Circus, and we actually pulled that off. That's one of those things that, you think it's done on a back lot. And And they did make a mock-up of Piccadilly where they would do what they, known as inserts, the close-up shots of vendors hitting, John Landis actually going back into a picture window. He actually did a little stunt, as he thought it would be fun to do. But the big scene itself, we actually did sort of what they now call stealing the scene, where they didn't have permission necessarily to have this, but they had all these great stunt guys in cars. It's 5:30 in the morning. Piccadilly Circus was really no traffic, hopefully, and on the queues, the cameras mounted around. And I remember being there in the morning. I got to get up to see the accident. It's going to be a big crash with the bus, and they did it in one take, multiple cameras, all hell breaking loose. Boom, cars, stunts. They rehearsed it. Of course, these were great stunt guys. And then in a matter of minutes, whoosh, it's gone like it never happened. Did you just see what did it? And of course, they're checking cameras. Did you get it? And they did, and you saw it.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
One of the things I think that really makes American Werewolf fun and stand out is the relationship between David and Jack. I mean, I think every guy in here had his Jack or David. Was that just instant chemistry between you and Griffin, or?
Yeah, it's one of those kind of things that help to make I think a movie work is lucking out in the casting. I think that we all were pretty lucky, and it so happened that Griffin and I had we were both from that part of the world in New England. He had grown up in the New York area. I'd grown up in Connecticut. We knew of people we'd never met before, and he was cast on the East Coast, and I was on the West Coast, and we didn't really meet until we got over there in London. But yeah, it's just one of those things where it doesn't hurt to be the only Americans, on the set, in the neighborhood, and you happen to be in London. So there's that aspect of being in a foreign country that helps. You hope, and then you can capture that on film.
I mean, it was captured beautifully. You said you've never met, but you would think you've known each other.
Well, the thing that we had in common was we had no idea where John Landis was coming from. John's a very high animated guy. He likes to play tricks on you. From an actor standpoint, one of the things you try to rely on is trusting the other actors and the other people. Trust, it's a collaboration, so that you know that whatever's going to happen, you're all in on it, and you're making this all together. Well, John doesn't always play by those rules, so you have to be on your toes going, I wonder what's going to happen, and so as an actor, you definitely, that's another bonding source. That's going, look, we're in this together. And I would never pull anything on Griffin without him knowing what I was going to do in the scene. John liked the idea of a real reaction. Well, it's okay for the scare, maybe. If there's a scene where, Griffin, I shut the medicine cabinet glass, and Griffin's in the back, and he's there going, really, you kid. Well, we knew, John was going to try to sneak him in there, so that when I'm rehearsing, I see him and react. But we were trying to impress upon John, we can still do it even if we know the joke. But that only helps in the chemistry.
Another question? Yes, sir.
Yes. No, you don't get the benefit of music. And afterwards, there were, as you know, I mean, who can listen to? I certainly can't, Moon Dance or Bad Moon Rising to this day. I have to think, and I'm sure other people do as well. One of the interesting, just kind of a funny anecdote is that he had talked or communicated with Cat Stevens at the time and wanted Moonshot as one of the opening theme song. And Cat wrote back, no, these are werewolves. You can't deal with, don't mess with werewolves. Okay. Right. So off they went with
Sorry.
Thank you, Cat.
Another question?
Yeah, the transformation was, as I said, I did the preliminary stuff in the shop back in San Fernando Valley. When it came time to actually shoot it, they wrapped the whole film. We'd done all the principal photography, so all the actors, everyone was wrapped, and it was just me and Rick and his staff. He had a couple of assistants, and John, of course, and we shot that transformation after everything had been done. And it took 6 days to shoot, and we shot it sort of in sequence. The beginning part was the hand that moved, and it was made out to look like my arm. That was like the beginning, but each subsequent stage of it was done in order, more and more hair. And I was in that makeup chair for a couple of days, 10 hours a day, for, as I said, a 6-day shoot. So it was a pretty painstaking thing. And what Rick talks about, complaining about, was once he got all the makeup on at a certain stage of makeup, there was only so much it could do. So they'd shoot for maybe 45 minutes, and John would go, "Is that all it does?" And he goes, "I've been spending 6 months on this. What else does it do?" The chicken Joe had, which was a mechanical head, the snout comes out. That's what it does. We shot that in 40 minutes. I said, "Wrap." Meanwhile, that had represented months of sculpting. And the other thing was that they talked about was not showing the wolf in its full length. They're trying not to show it. As you see in movies, think of all the movies you see, it's scary until you see a creature, unless it's really, bona fide fright. And I've always been of that same opinion that don't show it. There's one little glimpse of it. You see, in the subway, you see it starting to move. It's so much more terrifying to see people's reactions to whatever it is that it could be. And then, of course, when we're in Piccadilly at the end, it bites off the police inspector's head. You see it, but Rick didn't want really to show it all that much because he wasn't really. He's a perfectionist. He was never satisfied that it was just the way it should be.
Yeah, there is that one really cool shot in the subway where when he kills the guy, he's on the escalator. That's the first time he's supposed to see how large.
Yeah,
it never shows you the whole thing. Which is sort of cool.
No, it's cool in that it makes it an artistic choice not to show it. But also, he didn't build it to have 4 giant legs. So he didn't, there's also the practical side.
He was in a wheelbarrow.
Yeah.
Is there another question? Right at the back.
So I think that transformation scene, even by today's standards, is probably the best horror movie transformation scene. And a lot of that, I think, the fact that you didn't have all the technology and CGI today, so you really have to be creative and innovative. What are your thoughts on today? I mean, it just seems so easy just to on a computer.
Well, I certainly, my hat's off to all these artists, graphic designers, and so forth. Special effects artists. These guys are good, and to the extent that they don't necessarily make the decisions how much of it is on the film. That's made by other people. There's overuse of that. I particularly think that there's room for both. At least if you were to do a transformation today, and somebody said that there is talk about a remake. Oh, really? Well, we'll see if they do it. And of course, they'll probably use CG. Some form of computer graphics. And they have to use makeup as well. So I've always been, I sit there and talk about, well, they didn't use glass lenses, back in my day. That's one of the things, I see people coming up to the table wearing soft contact lenses, colored and so on. Well, in 1881, we had glass full lenses that were put in with a little suction cup. And not fun to take out. But everybody just looks at me now like,
I'm sure it would have made your life a lot easier.
yeah, it's a little bit more fun because you can't see out when you're not supposed to have them in for more than 10 minutes, or you can't do anything in the film's set, in under 2 hours.
Right there.
I know one of the most bizarre scenes in the film is probably the dream sequence. So
Right.
how was
Which one?
that?
There's a few.
The one with the Nazi werewolf.
Yeah, the Nazi demons. That's a question for John, of course. But what was horrific for him when he was writing the screenplay is, of course, Nazis and the idea of Nazi demons. So he delegated that to Rick, who then turned to his guys and said, okay, here's a point for each of you. He gave like 3 guys the assignment to design their own mask. And so there were 3 different, they were very bizarre looking. It would have been nice to have them a little more practical, like let the stuntman see out of them. One guy's got me by the throat, with a real knife, going, how come, can you see in that thing? He goes,
not really, I can't really see it. I can see where you are.
Oh, great. So I won't move, but I'll pretend like I'm trying to get away from him. This is what happens.
What was, how many people here have actually been to England before? Oh, a few. Yeah, because I think one of the funny things is that the movie starts off in the moors, you get attacked, you get injured, and you wake up in London, which is on the complete opposite end of the country.
Yeah.
What was England like? What was your favorite part?
Well, one of the things really about the film that, if it holds up at all, and people say we can still watch it, is the fact that we have London, one of the really most beautiful cities in the world, and it still looks like that, so it makes it timeless. It's not, even you'd see the cars, all the taxis, they're exactly the same, the red buses. They haven't changed England in hundreds of years, but you certainly don't see that, and it helps in looking at the film again. If you were to try to date the film, you can't really tell by looking around Trafalgar Square or in any of the areas. So London was particularly great. The crews were all very proud of the fact that they had a long film tradition. They go, but this was 1980. They weren't making a lot of movies. Superman was happening and had happened and was happening again. And we were on a little lot, Twickenham Studios. So it was far and away from the LA scene, which kind of helped. It was really felt like we were living through this experience.
Take another question.
Into that, I gotta get a coat,
What was your audition process like, and who was your competition that you tweeted out?
Oh, well, as I said, John saw a lot of guys for this for both parts. So, you just, over the course of the years, you run into people that, hey, I was up for that. Well, I was up for your role. So you run into people that you meet that have done other roles. So it was pretty extensive. As I said, he did a pretty extensive search and was looking for a combination of guys that were, the right age, of course, and, the sort of naivete of being somewhere just out for a good old time when things happen around them that you want to root for these guys.
One of my, we spoke about Griffin Dunn, but one of my favorite characters in the film, I'm not the sort of person that gets, like celebrity crushes, I'm in love with this actress, and I know the difference between reality and fantasy, but I have to admit, ever since I saw American Wolf London, I've kind of been in love with Nurse Alex. So I'm just really jealous of you getting to, yeah, there you go.
Nurse Alex, yeah. Any actor,
yeah, so what was it like acting?
Well, I'll tell you a little story. I had been an acting student in London about 5 years prior to the making of this film. And what we would do was go out to the theater all the time. And one of the cool things about studying acting in London is there's theater every night, every afternoon with shows. So we used to go, we were working with one of my roommates, 5 guys in a little apartment. Another American guy was working at the National Theater. And in the course of that weeks that we were there 2 years, but over the course, a play called Equus. I don't know if anybody remembers, it's a play about horses, blinding horses. A very psychological, heavy-duty play was playing at the National Theater. So we would go see, you gotta go see this play, Alex. We'd go to see it, and one of the things that they did was it was the effect of a jury on stage, like we are here, around here, so you could actually buy tickets and sit on the stage, but you had to, agree not to have a program. You had to sit there. But we, as acting students, come on, we got to get these seats that they have on stage for actors, and it will be right there, ringside seats, like a jury in a sense. And of course, you're sitting there behind the curtain. The curtain is up at the National Theater, and it's packed, 1,500 seats, and it's just frozen like that. And out comes these characters in this play. There's a boy who blinds the horses, and a stable girl, played by, that's right, Jenny Agutter, who I didn't even make the connection. I'd seen Jenny Agutter, you know, 3 times in Necklace, and I went, wait a minute. And it occurred to me during the course of this film that this was the same girl that we were all incredibly enamored of. And I had to tell her that. She goes, yeah, okay, yeah, another crush.
I cannot blame you. Another question?
Good.
No, there is one.
Any stick?
We'll take 2 more questions, and then we're going to get our winter jackets on.
Yeah, we got to go.
I'm curious, a lot of people talk about how this film at the time was when you read the screenplay,
It was very, yes, it was, you know, as I said, what we read, it was what we shot, and what you saw. It was pretty much the screenplay intact. And it played very funny, you know, and then it became a different story, you know, through the course of it. It's his journey to the realization that this is going to inevitably happen to him. And, you know, there's just little lines that David turns into a werewolf, you know, that takes months to do, but it's just like 2 lines in the script. But, you know, and then the relationship of David and Alex, that is all there. And of course, when his friend comes back, Jack, and that relationship is throughout the screenplay. So, yeah, it's funny throughout, but touching, and that's what we were going for. And as far as the, yeah, you see it all, and you read it all in the screenplay. And then, you know, the horror part is how scary is it going to be, you know? That's where you leave it in the hands of Rick Baker. And the challenge for him, of course, was to do all this makeup in bright lights. You know, that was the challenge. And of course, he went on to win the first Academy Award, and they created the category of special makeup in 1982 for the 1981 release.
Okay, so one more question.
The transformation scene is really agonizing, and I love the makeup, but the makeup is really as good as the actor. You know, like being able to move with makeup. And I was wondering how you were able, like, how did you get into that headspace? Was it having to sit for 10 hours?
Well, yeah, you know, it's not like something I'd done before, and I think that helped. You know, not knowing this was New Frontier. It's like, you know, I didn't go in there with a big, you know, ego. Let me meet this makeup guy. All right, how long is this going to take? Let me see the. No, you know, I was just in there for the ride and for as long as it was going to. And it was pretty amazing as you sit there to watch how it would go on, and it's pretty well documented, and people have been doing it ever since. But to see things and appliances go on and how you can start to, you know, contort right in front of your very eyes. And then there's the fun part of now we got to go play it, you know, and try to make this work. And the discussion that comes in is this euphoric, painful, a combination, are you conscious, not conscious? What are those choices that you make? And it's also an opportunity to let out a lot of angst. Having been sitting around, you know, all day, like, you know, even a patient man as myself at the time, you're at the limit, you're at the breaking point, and you can use all that.
Okay, guys, thanks a lot.
Hey, what a great audience. Thanks, folks.